Good morning, good morning, good morning, and welcome to another episode of Think and Grow Rich Live. Hi, my name is Ann McNeil, and I am, yes, I am the Master Wealth Builder, helping you to build a stronger and better life and business. And I am very excited every week. Yes, well, let me see. Yes, every single week, I am excited to talk about one of my favorite subjects, which is the book Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. And when I think about how this philosophy has changed so very many lives, starting with my own life, it just continues to encourage and to inspire me to continue to read, to teach, and to uplift others with this philosophy. And what I'd like for each of you to do today as we begin this conversation is think about how would you answer the question? And the question is, when Napoleon Hill was asked by Andrew Carnegie if he was willing to take 20 years of his life, 20 years of his life, 20 years of his life to research and study the lives of the rich and famous, as we would call them today, but the most successful men of his day, and create a philosophy of success. That is the beginning of the conversation that many of us are having all over the world about the philosophy of success, the philosophy of personal achievement, a philosophy that will give you your desires, your heart's desires, your burning desire for that which you sometimes claim you desire. Well, all of that takes an imagination. And with that imagination comes ideas. And with those ideas, it is required that we have action. And with that action, it is required that we have accountability. And with that accountability and that action, it is also required that we are obedient. Yes, that word, obedient to grow internally and also externally. Well, when you think about your imagination, which is what we're going to be discussing today, I would challenge you to think about the many different forms of imagination. And Napoleon Hill tells us in his phenomenal book, Think and Grow Rich, he tells us that we have actually two types of imagination. One type is called creative.
Well, when you think about your imagination, which is what we're going to be discussing today, I would challenge you to think about the many different forms of imagination. And Napoleon Hill tells us
in the background. So let me
Think and
see
Grow
how we
Rich.
can
He tells
do something with that. Thank you so very much. But when you think about what, okay, I think I just did something with that. Yes, I just did something with that. And the something that I just did is called ending the podcast. So, Galen, we are going to start all over. I ended that part of the podcast, and I think it would be important that I share with all of you. I am learning how to do this. So if you are willing to learn with me, this is called the imagination at work. Okay. So as I learn, I don't know about Galen, Peter's not here today, but as I learn how to use YouTube, I am learning how to use YouTube. But let's get back to the subject at hand here. All right. So synthetic imagination is one form of imagination that Napoleon Hill tells us that with this type of imagination, you are taking concepts, ideas, and you're combining them with other concepts and ideas that already exist. And this is, you can take, look around your room, wherever you are, and look at different things that exist in your room. For example, I am looking at 2 different forms of shades, 2 different forms of lights. So if you take the form of light, any kind of light that's in your room, and you take a bulb and you put in that bulb, take that bulb and put it in that light, it creates a different type of light. Now, creative imagination is when you take something from the infinite, a thought, a hunch, an inspiration, and then you mix that with action. A thought, a hunch, an inspiration, and you mix that with some type of action. That becomes creative imagination. You take authors, you take musicians, you take composers. They are tapping into the infinite intelligence, whatever you want to call it, and they are downloading ideas, thoughts, hunches, urgings. And those ideas, thoughts, hunches, and urges, and we can call them vibrations of thought. But it means absolutely nothing if they don't act on them. So as we begin to talk about this subject, I'm going to challenge each of you to think about what kinds of thoughts, ideas, urges, inspirations are you receiving that you are not acting upon. But of course, I would be remiss if I did not share with you that I am not alone. No, I'm not alone. So let me bring to the forefront my co-host, none other than Galen Bingham. Good morning, Galen. How are you this morning?
Good morning. Good morning. This is always an incredible book to talk about. This is always an incredible chapter to talk about. And as I share with you, I am always actually kind of frustrated at how many times I read this book and I see new things. I see things that clearly weren't there the last time I read it, and someone snuck into my office, pulled out the book, typed in new information, and then underlined that information and used my handwriting to put notes in the column because I did not see it before. And as we all know, the book hasn't changed, but I've changed. And so things that are obvious and meaningful and profitable to me now, perhaps they weren't meaningful and profitable to me before because I wasn't in that place. One of the things that's jumped out at me this time is where the chapters are placed, where the principles are placed. And it's always fascinating to me that I meet people who I ask them to come up with an idea, and they'll come up with an idea and then they'll say, but I don't know how to do that. It's like, this would be a great idea, but I don't know how to do it, so I won't pursue it. And Napoleon Hill strategically placed the imagination principle before he placed the organized planning principle. So the thought here is these are two separate principles, and you should not combine the two. Come up with the ideas, flush out the ideas, use your creative imagination, use your synthetic imagination, but give your ideas an opportunity to breathe and be born before you start worrying about the organized plan that may or may not bring those ideas to fruition. And Napoleon Hill laid out these principles beautifully. The other thing that jumped out at me this time I went through principles is where he says millions of people go through life hoping for favorable breaks. Perhaps a favorable break can get one an opportunity, but the safest plan is to not depend on luck. I've said this several times before. Anyone can have success by happenstance. Anyone can have success by luck. The question is, how can you have success on purpose? And this process again and again has demonstrated that it seems to be the surest process for creating success on purpose. So I can't wait to get further into this chapter as we sum up our month-long study on the principle of imagination. This really is the foundation of all great fortunes. Everything that has ever been created was first an idea, and someone has allowed that idea to not only form but to mature. And then after that idea has matured, they put in the organized plan to make that idea a reality. So that's my challenge to everyone, is to not crowd the idea maturation process with organized planning. Think through your idea, give it space, give it time, let it develop, and then be concerned with, how do I bring this idea to life? So those are some of my early thoughts, Ms. Ann. Can't wait for until we can get into this.
Okay, you mentioned something a few minutes ago, and that's why I came back on camera, about how these thoughts, these principles connect. I like to think of them like links in a chain to each other. So if you want to go ahead and talk about the 13 principles, it is so very important that we each understand how the imagination works, starting with that first principle called desire. And when you have a thought, an inspiration, or an urging to do something, what happens next? And then what happens next? And then what happens next? And I think that is the power that we see and we live and we experience through these 13 principles, starting with desire. So Galen, if you want to go ahead and tee that up, then we can come back and get into this conversation.
Absolutely. And another thing that the author says is that this principle, these philosophies, are built on natural law. So there's some natural law at play here. So when you listen to this video, think about how this is the natural process for making things happen. You start with a burning desire, and then you start stacking these principles on top of them. And that's how we have success on principles. So with that, let's kick off this video.
Number 1 is desire. Napoleon Hill said that everything starts with a burning desire, a compelling reason for doing what it is we do. Step 2 is faith, having belief in our ability to attain that which we desire. Step 3 is what we call autosuggestion. Autosuggestion simply means being very intentional about the things that we are pouring into our thoughts, into our brains, and into our consciousness. Our brains, our minds will receive everything automatically, but we have to work extra hard to make sure that the positive things are what we are feeding ourselves, because those positive thoughts are going to turn into positive actions. Step number 4 is specialized knowledge. No one person knows everything, even about whatever their particular area of expertise might be. And the value of the Mastermind principle is using the specialized knowledge of other people. Step number 5 is imagination, the workshop of the mind. Everything starts with our imagination and our thoughts, the burning desire to transform those thoughts into our reality. In order to do that, we have to take a look at step 6, which is organized planning. That is how we crystallize our desire into action, organizing ourselves. Having the thought and not acting on the thought isn't going to get us anywhere. We have the thought, we go through the organized planning to transform that thought into action. Step number 7 is decision. What Napoleon Hill said is the mastery of procrastination. Napoleon Hill said that the antidote to procrastination is simply to make a decision and then move on that decision. Step 8 is persistence. We have to have a sustained effort which is induced by our faith in order to achieve our goals. One of Napoleon Hill's books I love, even the title, 3 Feet from Gold. Those people who became rich during the gold rush in the Wild Wild West days didn't do that because they were necessarily smarter or had better information than anyone else. It's because they stayed just a little bit longer. Sometimes people left when they were just literally 3 feet from gold. So hanging in there, being persistent, is step number 8. Step number 9, the power of the mastermind, the driving force. Who you are, from the most prominent person to the person who might be considered the lowest on the totem pole. Everybody has someone who helped them get to where they are. And the power of the mastermind is being able to use those influences around us. Use the thoughts, use the knowledge, use the exploration of other people to help us in achieving our goal. Step number 10, the mystery of sex transmutation. This title can be a little confusing, but essentially what the mystery of sex transmutation means is that we oftentimes in our society think of sex as being purely physical. It is absolutely physical, but what Napoleon Hill teaches us is that sex also has an emotional element, and that sex is the strongest of our desires. That if we can take our sexual energy, transform that into positive, creative influences, it can propel us to new heights. And so we spend quite a bit of time talking about the mystery of Step 10, which is sex transmutation. 11 is the subconscious mind, which Napoleon Hill tells us is the connecting leap between our human mind and the infinite intelligence, the source of all thought, the source of all creativity. Conscious mind, we spent some time talking about how we use that through the influence of autosuggestion and what we're feeding into our mind. Step number 12, which is the brain, the broadcasting and receiving station of thought. Final step number 13, the sixth sense, the door to the temple of wisdom. This is the final step through which infinite intelligence may and will communicate voluntarily without any effort from or demands by the individual. The principle is the apex of the philosophy. It can be assimilated, understood, and applied only by first mastering the other 12 principles.
All right. All right, Galen, you're up.
Yeah, so this is again, I just love the way everything stacks on top of each other to help you achieve your success on purpose. But today we're talking about the imagination. And I'm gonna pose back to you and something that I offered before on the other side of the video. How many times do you see ideas become stillborn and not find their space because the person with the idea is concerned about, well, how am I going to make this a reality? Instead of spending time flushing out and leveraging their imagination, they start thinking about the how. The what isn't even fully formed, but they're concerned about the how, and that's what's getting in their way.
Well, Galen, I don't know about how many times others. How about I talk about myself? How about I talk about myself? I think for all of us, Galen, we have a connection to something within us. And oftentimes we give it a different name depending upon where we come from. Some of us, we call it the spirit, some Allah, whatever you call it. Once we become conscious and aware that that exists, and it exists inside of us, ideas, thoughts, inspirations come all the time. And what I'm learning is that the more work I do within myself, it is rapid, 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 rapid. So the ideas come and I write them down as best I can by tapping into the spirit. And that's why you often hear me talk about a daily date with myself, because during the day, ideas come. I keep a pad in my car. I'm learning to use the notes in my phone, but it is in the quiet time that I find when I am centered and I'm alone and I'm present with the spirit for long periods of time, then I am open to receive the ideas. Now, your question was about stillborn. What I am learning also, Galen, and this came up in our Black NSA Mastermind this week, one of our masterminders asked me the question, okay, I write these ideas down, but then I have a larger vision of things that I want. How do these things connect? And I will encourage all of us, like I encouraged him on Monday night. I said, first of all, you want to have a place where you are willing to journal these thoughts and these ideas, and they're free flowing. But then you want to give specific time to focused energy of the mind on the specific idea. And this is where stillborn comes in. When we have a desire, and now I have a better understanding of why the author tells us to start with money. I didn't get that for years. Why money? I know it's called Think and Grow Rich, but why do I have to focus on the money? But then I began to realize it is quantifiable, it is measurable, it's time bound, the 6 steps to riches. So if I focus on the amount of money, then the thoughts and ideas are specific. My imagination is specific toward that amount of money versus, let it flow. I'm just talking about stillborn. So what I'm learning in my own life is that when I started living in these principles and understanding, if I focus on the amount of money, it's not all about the money. So let's make sure we're clear about that. I'm reminded of something that Jim Rohn said that his coach told him. He said, Jim, you should become a millionaire, not for the money, but who you must become to make the money. So the amount of money is not about the money. It is who we must become. I don't care if it's $1,000. For me, it was $1,000 to save $1,000 a year. And it took me 10 years, Galen. Why? Because I had ideas that I did not act upon. This is where stillborn comes in. I had ideas. I did not know they were ideas, because ideas, once acted upon with focused energy and accountability, can be transmuted into money. But we must have focused energy, like, rubbing those bricks or sticks together until you create fire. Well, you cut a couple of rubs, you're not going to create anything. But you keep rubbing and you keep putting burning desire, it will burn. And in you, something will begin to burn that will give life to the ideas, Galen, and the thoughts, and they will birth into something greater, I think, than myself. So those are my thoughts, and I can go into a couple of ideas. I'll do one in particular idea I had. And I acted on it. And that was the idea to form the National Association of Black Women in Construction. God had to walk me down, Galen, for 10 years. I didn't act on the idea. I thought it was for somebody else. And I kept giving him excuses, not me. Why me? God, you don't understand Black women in construction. You don't understand Black women like I do. You gotta be kidding. You want me to do what? And so I let that idea just languish. So instead of, regular birth, 9 months, it took 9 years. So those are just some thoughts of mine. But what about you? What are some ideas that you may have had that are stillborn?
Oh my gosh. And one of the things that you point out is how we often run from, or we don't acknowledge, or if we get the idea, we think that it's clearly intended for someone else. And, one of the ideas that I had was around this idea that I could be an advisor to senior executives. And that's what I've always said that I've wanted to do. I didn't explain it that way. I used to say when I was 15, I said, I don't want everyone to know who I am, but I want those who really need to know that I am here and that I can help them. And I didn't know what that was called. And of course, you get into the world, you start, trying to get an education. You start trying to do these things that people say that you're supposed to do. You start trying to become who the world says you're supposed to become. And it's not until you step into who you are, who you actually are, and who you were created to be, that you find the courage to, as Miles Davis would say, play like yourself instead of playing like someone else.
Oh,
and,
wow.
and now this is a reality. And you were even part of that process for me. I mean, even when I was in this space, you were challenging me to step into what I was being told by the infinite that was intended for me. So this thing really does take all the other principles to make it a reality. You need to have a mastermind. You need to have an organized plan. You need to have a desire. But the real fuel of this is allowing your imagination to run with some focus without any consideration as to how you're going to make it a reality. So, again, these principles, I don't really understand how they work at times. I just know that they seem to work. And as Napoleon Hill says, these are natural laws. Your first step is to understand what those natural laws are, so that you can begin using them on your behalf. So that's the way this has manifested in my life. And before we go further into this, I just want to acknowledge some of the participants that are in the studio with us, because we got some familiar faces. Charles is here, so thank you for being. I think I see Charles almost every week. Doretha has been hanging with us for many years. Patrick is brilliant. He's got a technology firm that is absolutely amazing. Talk about bringing things to life. Tina, thanks for hanging out with us. Brilliant financial executive. And then Tony. So if you guys get ready, because this is a masterclass session and it's really focused on you. So get your questions ready. Ann and I are going to be here to address and answer any questions that you might have. So get those questions ready. But Ann, I want to go back to something that we talked about, earlier that you brought up. I love the fact that you've got a way of capturing ideas when they come. Because as my dad used to say, you got to get it when it comes, because it never comes back the same way twice. And if you think to yourself, wow, that was a brilliant idea, I'm going to remember that. All you need is to have someone ask you a question and you've lost 40% of that idea. So if you don't have the notes app in your phone, if you don't have a notepad, if you don't have something to capture those ideas, particularly in the mornings, and I know, and you talk about why it's really, really important to capture ideas in the mornings. So talk about why that seems to be a great time to get not only synthetic ideas, but creative ideas first thing in the morning.
Well, let me just, let me share with all of you, this book that I wrote is called A Daily Date with Myself. And it's a daily journal. And in it has 4 or 5 different sections. One section is it requires you to have the day to date, the location, and the time. But then there's a couple of pages that are just blank. They're just blank pages. And one of my favorite books, Galen, Julia Cameron wrote a book called The Artist's Way, and I actually have it here behind me. And in her book, she talks about morning pages and why it is so very important to do this exercise in the morning, because you're open to receive the spirit as it sends you the download for most of us, right? You want to call it thought impressions, inspirational things, whatever it is. I like to say that the first few minutes for me when I journal, I'm just emptying the mind. And many of you have heard me talk about emptying the body. We do that every morning. But where do you empty the mind? And so on my journal, that first thing I do, and I start out with just a legal pad, Galen, and we're talking about imagination, creative and synthetic imagination and ideas. And after I do that, then I ask my mind to give me the next session in my journal is called opportunities. And it's just the word opportunities. And then I number 1 through 10. And again, you can do this on a legal pad or you can get my book, either one. But the idea is to do the exercise. Have a specific place you are recording the ideas on purpose. A sticky pad, a notebook here and there is one thing, but to be organized in your thoughts, that goes back to the principle of organized planning. We should also organize and plan our thoughts, which precedes our actions, right? The next area of the journal says lessons learned, because what I began to realize, Galen, is that on a daily basis, I'm learning things that did work and did not work. But where do I record those so that I can go back? The next area of my journal is called what I'm thankful for. It's just really gratitude, giving gratitude for my family, my friends, those individuals that I work for and with in my 5 different businesses, and just giving thanks for that. And then finally, the last section is called Desires of My Heart. And I began to realize, Galen, over the years, when talking about imagination, I had ideas of things that I wanted to do and to have and to be, because it is in the being, that we find that that success comes in being, whatever it is you choose you want to be, not just in the doing of whatever that is. And so I began to realize, Galen, that these thoughts turn to actions, and these actions turned into what we now call success. So I pray for something. I got thoughts from the prayers. I developed action items with my accountability partner and mastermind groups, took those actions, many of them over years. But what I realized, Galen, going back to imagination, is that as I work this exercise on a daily basis, that the desires of my heart was being fulfilled by God, but I had not gone back and specifically said, thank you for this desire specifically being fulfilled. And that's one of the reasons why I wrote in my journal that I needed to be specific. And and sometimes I don't get them all. Most time I don't get them all. But just for the mere fact that I do the exercise, I can literally be 10, 20, 30, sometimes an hour. But that's just me. I'm not asking anybody else to do that, Galen. But again, it is a routine. It is an exercise. And that's why I call it a daily date with myself, because it is how I make deposits into myself, Galen, with this principle of imagination. Because people are making withdrawals from every single one of us every single day. And if we're not careful, the withdrawals will exceed the deposits. And Napoleon Hill, that is, he tells us that when we're willing to transfer these impulses of thoughts and desires into the reality of money, you got to have plans, but I also like to suggest you got to have accountability by individuals like yourself and others who are willing to hold us accountable to those desires that we have. So that's it for me. And what yes.
I'll tell you, one of the things that I think is incredibly significant about what you just described is not the fact that you've done it. It's the fact that you've got a routine for doing it ongoingly. It's the routine. And I always like to marry this principles from this book that was written in 1937 with concepts that people think are brand new today. And Viktor Frankl talked about this in his book As a Man Thinketh. And then Malcolm Gladwell popularized this idea that in order to be a master at anything, it requires 10,000 hours. Well, 10,000 hours, that's a whole lot for someone to take in. There's new research that says, although it might take 10,000 hours to become a master at something, to become relatively good, it takes 20 hours. Just 20 hours. 20 hours of dedicated focus at trying to get relatively good at a thing, you'll be pretty good. And 20 hours sounds like a lot, except for when you think about what if you did that 30 minutes a day? Just 30 minutes a day for just a few months, you're going to be relatively good. I often wanted to become relatively good at playing golf. It takes 20 hours of dedicated focus at trying to become good at the skills of playing golf to become relatively good. So, what you just described is how you become relatively good at using your imagination. Give it space 45 minutes a day, 20 minutes a day, 15 minutes a day, ongoingly for a total of 20 hours. And you're going to, just like exercise, you're going to exercise those imagination muscles and you're going to become relatively good at using your imagination. So many times we want to go from not using our imagination at all to having ideas that will lead to 5 businesses worth over several millions of dollars. And that's just not how things work. You have to use your skills, use your muscles ongoingly in order to develop those skills.
Yeah, Galen, I want to go back to something you said about Malcolm Gladwell, because where did he get the idea about the 10,000 hours? You ever thought about that? He got it from Think and Grow Rich, because Edison was the first one we read about that did the 10,000 hours actually of what did not work, when he was looking for the answer to the question about how to get light in this bulb, a filler that would burn long enough in order to give us light. Now, let's go back to synthetic and creative imagination. What we just did for all of us, we just took an idea that Malcolm had, which was a synthetic imagination. He used synthetic imagination by taking an old idea, which is something Edison did, and he re-energized it for the rest of us, right? So I want to ask all of you that's listening, think about an idea that you have or had. Can you tell us if that idea was either creative or synthetic? And Galen, I'm going to ask you to do the same, and I'm going to share an example because I think it's so very important that we share with the listeners, how do you actually go from this first step to the next step, to the next step, to the next step. And Napoleon Hill actually says he encourages all of us that to read this book through, go back and read it again, then go back and read it again. And then once you put your imagination to work, what's going to happen is ideas and plans are going to come to you. Then now you're going to transfer those ideas and those plans into money. It may be money for you. It may not be. But these instructions for building these plans is in the principle of organized planning. You can go back to the book and you can get that. But the accountability for the plans you're going to find in the principle of the mastermind. All right. But you're going to need faith. You're going to need desire. You're going to need auto-suggestion, because when he gives you the 6 steps, this is how you go from step 1, the amount of money, step 2, doing what, step 3, by when. So Galen, my example is, as I continue to read this book, I came upon this principle or this idea, if you will. I mentioned earlier, to start an organization called the National Association of Black Women in Construction. Perfect. 10 years in to the idea, in this book and these principles every single month. But something happened, Galen, upon reading the book. I had an idea, and the idea actually came from Carnegie's conversation that he had with Schwab. when they were talking about this question of the steel. And as we know, go back to the desire, Carnegie knew absolutely nothing about the making and the marketing of steel. What he knew was how to organize men. And I want to share this with all of us, because when you have an idea, how do you organize the resources that you need in order to take your idea to reality, right? So Galen, as I was reading this story 10 years in, I reread it and got an idea. The story is that Schwab convinced Carnegie to sell, and he would get all of the other small manufacturers of steel to come together with Carnegie, and they would form what we now know as U.S. Steel. All right. This is Schwab now, had to sell the idea at what the media called, and this is in the book, you can go, it's in the book. The media called Schwab's speech a $1 billion after dinner speech, because he had all of the billionaires in the room and he was going to sell them on this idea to come together. And years of reading this, and this is what I wanted to share with all of us when we talk about it. What do you do with ideas? How does it work? What is a real life example in your life? I'm just sharing with you just one in my own life. So as I'm reading this, I'm thinking to myself, well, wait a minute now. If Charles Schwab can take an idea to bring billionaires together and form, now here's a synthetic imagination, and form a corporation called U.S. Steel, why can I not do that? You see, so many of us, just because we are small, does not mean we have to think small. And so from reading this book over and over and over, and I get years for myself, it is elevating my self-confidence and elevating my ideas and my imagination to think higher. So Galen, what I did was I took out a pad and I started writing. I said, how can I use this idea that Schwab did? How can I bring together billions of dollars of opportunities around food? Because this was a dinner speech he gave. So I looked at the 6 steps. And when you go back to that principle in the book, he actually used the 6 steps. It was how much money he needed. He knew the amount. What was he going to do to get the amount of money? He was going to pull them all together and form this organization. By when, he had a date. And what was his plan? He had a plan. So I did the exact same thing, Galen, on paper. And my idea was this. In my business, I'm a contractor by profession. I own a construction company, 45 years in the industry. And so I said, how can I bring together, Galen, ideas and people who have billions of dollars? Galen, you know who has billions of dollars? You want to take a guess? Oh, you don't want to guess. Okay, well, I'll tell you. Federal government, the cities, the counties, they have billions of dollars of opportunities. So I said, what if I approach by industry? Because in my profession, and I'll challenge all of you to think about the same thing in your own profession, a creative idea and a synthetic idea. I learned, and I'm still learning, to be an investor. When you invest, you have a personal portfolio. That personal portfolio has industries, it has sectors. Think about your own business. And when you think about sectors and industries, they're separate. So I looked at my own industry, coming back to the idea, the $1 billion idea, which is now a $1 trillion idea. We'll get to that later. I said, okay, what if I invited the federal government, the cities, and the counties to bring together over lunch billions of dollars of opportunities in my industry, starting with educational industry, that's your schools, and then starting with airports, and then seaports, and then transportation. And you can go on in the industries. And these industries came from my investment knowledge. So I'm just giving an idea of how I transmute ideas into money. So I looked at my business, Galen, and I realized that as I analyzed my business, I categorized it by sectors and by industries. And then I saw something that I'd never seen before, Galen, that my clients that work, that's architects and engineers and owners that work in the aviation space, Galen, they don't work in water. They don't work in healthcare. So to wrap the story up, 3 years now, I've taken this idea of $1 billion luncheon and I started using it in my business, and my business went through the roof. My friends who are Black women in construction was like, what are you doing? Can you share? And I started sharing with them. And now we host as an association that's not for profit. And you can Google this, you can go to YouTube, you can go anywhere, and you can find Black women in construction $1 billion luncheons. And when I tell you, it has been phenomenal. Now it has moved, Galen, from billions to trillions, because now I've been invited on the last couple of years before the infrastructure bill was passed. I've been invited by the White House to participate with them to help them now understand, how do you take these trillions of dollars and bring them into our community? So that's a very, very Ann McNeil story, if you will, Galen. So we are masterminding this idea of how do you transmute, and I'm asking each of you that's listening to us, evergreen in the future live, think about what ideas do you have, because the book challenged us. The author challenged us when he gave us 2 stories. What would I do if I had $1 million? And the story of Coca-Cola. And he says to all of us, listen, you can do the same thing. And I took it to heart, but it took me a long time to get my self-confidence up to that level, to where now I understand that I did not understand it. It was just a matter of my imagination at work. And how do you transmute these desires into cash? So Galen, I know that was
No, I mean, but you know, I've got a very similar story in that, you know, I've been going by the branding of the leadership strategist for years now, and a lot of times people will ask, what does that mean? What is a strategist? Well, strategy very literally is how do you bridge an idea to a tangible reality? How do you make this idea a reality? And that's what my specialty is. That's what my focus has been throughout the entire 30 years I spent in corporate America. So I had a client a few years back who came to me and said, you know, Galen, I've got all these brilliant ideas. I got all these big ideas. I can list 15 of them, but I don't know how to make them a reality. They're so big. I'm kind of overwhelmed. And because of that, my head went into overdrive trying to figure out how could I help him. How can I help them create a process to go from their big idea to something that's tangible, that they can realistically go to what they're saying that they want. And I started using the book. I started using the 6 principles of the book to get clarity over what it is that you're looking for. The first step is to clarify, what is this thing that you're wanting to manifest? And I use the 6 steps that Napoleon Hill talks about to help my client clarify what it is that they're looking for. And then I started looking at, what are the things that might get in the way? What are the challenges that might get in the way? And I started using neuroscience and the work of Daniel Goleman, which I use in my coaching business, to help people understand, how does the brain work and what might get in the way? And then through synthetic imagination, I started using research from Shazad Sherman, who talks about the voice of the negative self-talk, and how does that voice show up in the moment to prevent you from doing the things that you want. So there's a place where we focus on that negative self-talk and that voice. And then I used, the tools that I've used in corporate America for 30 years to actually build out the steps that go into making any task, any goal a reality. And then I pulled it into a document very similar to a document that I used for many years at the Coca-Cola company, where we would take a snapshot of all the things that are important to focus on, and then just start measuring progress against that focus. And very similar to you, I shared the tool with a couple of colleagues, couple of coaching colleagues, and they said, wow, Galen, it's amazing that you created this and that you use this with your clients, but you really should make this available to other people because other folks can use this as well. And I partnered with the expertise of Patrick Alexander, who's here in the studio with us, and he actually helped me turn this process, this synthetic imagined process into the hot sheet. So now the hot sheet is available, it's a thing, but it just really synthesizes all the work done by all these brilliant people, and it does it in a way that's consistent with how I work with clients to help people go from an idea to something tangible that you can measure. And I'll tell you, Ann, too, another person that I use is you, because every year you have us prepare for our annual meeting. And in that annual meeting, you asked us to put our life in writing, detail our goals, but then also give an account to what did you do this past year? What did you do over the past 364 days that can give you confidence that the next 365 days are going to be successful? And so this is one of the tools where there's a printout where you can show your life in writing and you can show your plan for the upcoming year. So going back to this imagination chapter, there's creative imagination, but this is an entire tool built off of synthetic imagination. Now, I had the idea for years and didn't really do anything with it until I had some accountability partners say, no, Galen, you need to make this a reality. Even as late as 3 weeks ago, and you were coaching me and encouraging me to stop playing with it and make this thing a reality. So that is an example that's a real thing. You can go to hotsheetapp.com and see the hot sheet. And it's really linked to all the things that I've experienced before. And it's also linked to this annual meeting. So, Ann, I want you to talk a little bit about the annual meeting, because it really does provide a lot of inspiration for people to get off of the stick relative to these things that you say that you want to do. You're on mute right now.
Okay, that's better. Before I do that, I just wanted to just mention that Charles Bright had a question in the chat. He said, how do you get out of the habit of having someone else validate your ideas before pursuing? And I would say, I put in the chat, Charles, self-confidence, but I would actually go back to a burning desire, because when you have a burning desire, it will burn through everything that stands in your way. And oftentimes our desire is not a burning desire, it's lax. It is wishy-washy. And that goes back to the point that Galen was making about an idea being stillborn. And I would also encourage you, give it time. Read the book, go back and read it again, and consider identifying one person, not lots of people, just one person who would be willing to hold you accountable for that desire. I tell people I'm on this journey for 45 years. This is not the same Ann McNeil that you would have met, year 1, year 2, even year 10 or year 20 or year 30 on this journey. And so I want to encourage all of us to think about the fact that this is a it is a journey. It is not a destination. And oftentimes we're looking for a destination and we're not willing to invest the time on the journey. But I would tell you that the joys are in the journey. The joys are in the journey. The joys are in the journey, in who and what we must become to achieve that which we desire. So Charles, I would go back and do that to help better understand what you may have access to. And also, Galen, I also want to thank, before we go to that, I want to thank Jason Murray and Johnny Lloyd, all of you that are listening in on the YouTube channel. And again, if you have any questions or comments, many of you are saying good morning and good morning back to you. Johnny says organize and purpose is key. Sherry Rudolph is sharing the good morning, great information, invaluable information on how to apply the principles of the book. Jason Murray says, focus on the principle of masterminding. And so thank you, all of you. Jason again says, I can relate, Galen, as I spent 30 years in corporate America in sales and marketing, and then transitioned to an entrepreneur. And many of us are entrepreneurs before we are entrepreneurs. And just wanted to share that. So Galen, let me
jump in on that on Charles's question too, okay. Because this sparked up the coaching side of me. Charles, the fact that you asked that question suggests to me that you already know that your ideas are being stalled because of this desire to get validation from other people. I believe that we always know what we need. And the fact that you asked that question suggests that you already know that that's a challenge. So I'm going to take something that Ann suggested and go a step further. Not only do you want to have a mastermind, I think you want to have an accountability partner. You want to tell them that you have a tendency to let other people's validation of your ideas get in the way of your ideas. And you want to endorse that accountability partner to hold you accountability and make sure that that doesn't happen. I had this exact same situation happen to me relative to the hot sheet. And I was on this call and Ann McNeil heard me talking about all the reasons why this wasn't the time and it wasn't ready and I need to do one more thing. And finally Ann said, Galen, will you stop messing around and make this thing happen? Just get started. And the reason she was able to do that and the reason that I was able to hear her is because we talk every week and she knows how I operate. I've given her the authority and I've endorsed her ability to hold me accountable. And she did it publicly. So all the professional persona that I had went down the drain when she said, Galen, will you stop messing around and make this thing happen? So Charles, that's what I'm going to encourage you to do. Find somebody and give them the authority to hold you accountable for not letting other people's validation get in the way of your success.
All right. Thank you both for that. So let's go to the annual meeting. And I like to call it a meeting for your life. A meeting for your life. We just finished talking about who's holding you accountable, but where do you bring your life in writing? And so on an annual basis, and I along with my mastermind group, the original women of mastermind, which many of them are on the front row here, the picture you're seeing, and those of you that are listening to the audio and you can't see what we see, we're showing a picture of our 2024 International Mastermind Association Think and Grow Rich annual meeting for your life. And this is where Galen was talking about bringing your life in writing. And that is Galen in the far back in the awesome popping blue. But I like to challenge everyone to imagine on an annual basis, you had to go before a tribunal. And this tribunal would determine at the end of the year if you had the right to go into the next year with another 365 days. And you could only enter the next year based upon what you did and did not do, based upon what you said you were going to do in the current 365. In your spiritual life, where are your goals? In your family life, where are your goals? Written. In your finances, where are your goals? Written. In the educational area of your life, you're going to read one book a year. You're going to read a page a day, whatever it is, where is it written? Your health, we have a checklist of all of the exams that you should do or consider doing. Where is it written? Your personal development, or if you want to call it professional development, where are your goals written? And along with the goals, where are your plans? And I like what Galen does. He does a pictorial. And then if you have a business or your profession, what are your goals? Where is it written? And then the recreational area of your life, well, where is it written? Like on an annual basis, I love going out of the country. Well, I've already been 3 times this year and in the process of getting ready to leave again in a month to go back to Africa, 6 cities. But that was a goal. Then the area of your civic involvement. Are you involved in any kind of civic organization in your business or your life? Where's it written? And then finally, the subject we're discussing today, and this is where it comes from. I realized years and years and years, when we first started doing this process, it was only 4 areas. And then over the years, it grew to now it's 10. But the creativity I added over 10 years ago as I started journaling, because I began to realize that if we're not setting a goal creatively, it can be to write a book or sing a song, whatever is creative for you. But you can get more information from going to our website at internationalmasterminders.com, because we will be hosting this meeting on January 5th and 6th in 2024. January 5th and 6th, 2024. We start on that Friday night with I call it, just a networking opportunity where people just come and share, because during that time, anybody can just get up and share. On the following day, Saturday, we focus purely on the business, and children are invited. And actually, we do have a mastermind group for children that meet on Sundays between 3:30 and 4 o'clock. And we'll encourage all of you. You can get the information by going to www.internationalmasterminders.com. All these details are there. All right, Galen. So Galen, if you want to share with everybody how they can reach you, because we are after the hour. And what if we had a guest today? My goodness, where'd the time go?
That just goes to show you how powerful and addictive this content is once you get into it. I'll tell you, one of the things that was reinforced to me during this conversation is how you don't get what you want. We don't get what we want. We get what we focus on most of the time. So whatever we focus on most of the time, that's what we get. And so my question to you in this conversation was a reminder to me, how purposeful are you at articulating what you want to become? How purposeful are you at determining what you focus on? Or are you just letting the day go by? Or are you just letting the television tell you what you need to focus on? Or are you just letting the internet tell you what you need to focus on? As opposed to taking charge and deciding, this is who I want to be, this is what I want to have, this is what I want to do. And then as the chapter for the principle for next month is going to discuss, building an organized plan around making that life a reality. That's what Ann just described about the annual meeting. That's what the hot sheet is about. That's what this principle is about. This philosophy is about. How do you create a life that you want to have on purpose rather than waiting for luck or chance? My name is Galen Bingham. I am the leadership strategist, and there are just so many ways you can get a hold of me. I'm on Facebook, I'm on LinkedIn, I am on almost every social media. You can even go to my podcast, Whiskey, Jazz, and Leadership. But the most profitable way to get a hold of me is to go to hotsheetapp.com. Take a look at the hot sheet. There's a video there that explains the process and how this will benefit you. I detail not only the process, but the millions of people who have used these concepts to create the kind of life that they want on purpose. I double dog dare you to check it out and see if the hot sheet can help you create the kind of life that you want on purpose. What about you, Ms. Ann?
Well, Galen, for me, I would encourage everybody, you can reach me at annmcneil.com/coaching if you're interested in having greater clarity in each area of your life. But as a builder that build lives, help to build lives, we also help to build buildings. We also help to build communities. And I focus on helping people get clarity on how to niche to be richer. And I do that at my one-day retreat. It's a business retreat. And you can connect with us because we will host that on Wednesday, September the 6th, 2023. And you can go to my website to register for the details on that. And I also would encourage you, though, but only if you're serious. You know, I am not for everybody, actually. If you know you have billions of dollars in your mindset and you'd like to see millions of dollars in your bank account, then we can connect. But if not, then you may want to talk with somebody else. So annmcneil.com/coaching, you can get the details there. But Galen, I want to also, before we wrap up, and I'm glad you called out Patrick, because I think it's time for Patrick for you to come back and be a guest on the podcast. It's been years, and we would love to have you come back and share your growth and how this philosophy years ago helped to catapult your business. Literally, I think you moved from Miami to Atlanta, if I'm not mistaken. Right, Galen? I think that was the transition. And a lot of that came out of getting greater clarity about who you are and who you serve and where your clients live. And so we're glad to have you back. And many of you, if you're interested in being back on the podcast, please let us know. You can reach us by going to my website also. We have sent all of you the information. You can put it in the chat on any of the social media. I don't have a problem in giving you my number. Net number is 786, and I'll put that in the chat, 786-546-0184. Doretha, somebody, if you can help me on YouTube, just put Ann McNeil's cell phone number. I don't have a problem in sharing that, 786-546-0184. And if you're interested in being on our podcast, we do have a process. Everybody, you know, who say yay, you may, and then again, you may not, depending upon if you read the book. It's important to read the book and the principle and help us understand how do you apply it to your life or your business. And that's really the only criteria. I would also challenge and encourage you, if you're interested in those 6 steps to riches, on how do you translate your desire into its monetary equivalent, then you can text the word ANN, that's ANN, at the number 55678. So if you take out your device and go to your chat, and the number is 55678. Again, that number is 55678. And then in the chat section, you would just put the word or the name Ann. All right, Galen, we're going to go ahead and wrap up. Thank you, everybody. Galen, if you have any last comment before we wrap up, we want to thank everybody for joining us today.
No, the only comment is that you really owe it to yourself to get into this book, get into this philosophy so that you too can think and grow rich. Until next time, take care.